Hi everybody, and welcome to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. In this video, we begin with a really interesting post from the subreddit Relationship Advice. Then we're gonna move on to some malicious compliance, and we're gonna wrap up the video with some petty revenge. As usual, if you wanna move throughout the video, you can always use the timestamps right below it. Now, let's get started with the first story. This post is from the subreddit Relationship Advice, and it's by user throwaway12082010. My 31 male, wife, 29 female, recently ran into her ex-boyfriend from high school, and it's making me insecure. For context, my wife and I have known each other since middle school. I was in the grade above her. We lived in the same part of a smallish town, and our families went to the same church. So it's safe to say we were always bumping into each other growing up. We ran in parallel circles, but we never really shared the same group of friends. During my sophomore and junior year of high school, we would talk sometimes. I would drive her home every once in a while, and I could tell that she had a small crush on me, but I mostly ignored it. During her junior and my senior year, she started dating the ex this post is about. He was pretty much the opposite of what anyone would have expected her to date at that point, and her personality did a complete 180 pretty soon after they started dating. She stopped hanging out with her old friends, became more outspoken, and ended up skipping her junior prom. I left for college on the other side of the country and came back the next summer to find out that he had broken up with her a couple of weeks before graduation and skipped town after, leaving her devastated. I bumped into her at the local ice cream parlor where she was working over the summer for some extra money for college, and we hung out almost every day after that. She never really talked about her ex, and I figured she was mostly over him. About 2 weeks after we first started hanging out, we made out, for the first time, in the backseat of my car. It ended with her crying and apologizing because she wasn't over her ex. She said that she was still in love with him and didn't think she would ever get over him. At that point, I realized that I was already falling for her and agreed to just be friends. We spent the entire summer together, with me slowly falling in love with her. Our colleges ended up being pretty close to each other, so we would hang out pretty often. We also spent Thanksgiving together. I was pretty sure we would end up together when we went back that winter, but she got a letter from him, explaining everything but with no return address, causing her to spiral again. We ended up getting together the next summer and got married almost 3 years ago. It was going really well until she ran to get milk about 3 weeks ago and bumped into him, completely out of the blue, across the country from our hometown, in our neighborhood. Apparently, he got his life together after leaving his deadbeat dad, went to college, and is now a journalist. My wife currently stays home with our 6-month-old, while I work a pretty time-intensive job. She's been spending a lot of time with him lately, and I don't know what to do. Every time she mentions him or things they did, I can't help but feel extremely jealous and insecure, like she still prefers him to me. From whatever little she has told me about their relationship, I know he's the complete opposite of me, and that's what attracted her to him. What should I do? Well, OP, I would say communication is key at this point. You need to talk to your wife and tell her how you feel and why you're feeling like this. You're not accusing her of doing anything inappropriate, and that is something that she needs to truly understand when you talk to her. But I think you need to tell her about your insecurities and the reasons they exist. There's no shame in acknowledging any of that, and actually saying it out loud and sharing that with her will drive you guys closer together. Now, before you talk to her, I would recommend that you have a clear view of what the outcome is that you want from that conversation. Would you ask her to not see him as much or to see him not at all? What is it that you want and what would make you comfortable going forward? But yeah, in summary, I'd say talk to your wife and be honest. But what about you guys? What kind of advice would you give OP? Let me know in the comments section, and now let's move on to the community comments to see what they said. Self-Inflicted says, why is your wife hanging out with her ex who she never got over? You should lay down some boundaries. Don't fall for that BS, you're insecure and you don't trust me nonsense. This is not a time to be weak. Masters Layer 96 says, ask your wife whether she wants to be with you or her ex. If she wants to get back with her ex, then get a divorce and live your life with your 6-month-old. Be with a woman who really loves you and makes you her first choice now and always, regardless what was in her past. Don't be or beg to be with someone who is still in love with their ex or make you as a doormat or safety net or second choice. Kranok says, have you talked to her about that? This will end very quickly, very badly for you, especially since she is already spending lots of time with him. During your relationship, she gave you every reason to believe that she isn't over him, so the thoughts that you have on your mind right now have a reason to be there. Have you ever been invited to hang out with them too, or is she spending time with him alone? Where do they meet, in public or in secluded and private places? Do you know what they are talking about? How is she acting with her phone? Do you have access to it? Could you ask her to take a look at the conversations they have? And Opie responds, they mostly go for walks with the baby and lunch every once in a while. He's been over a couple of times, I think. I don't really know what they are talking about, but they've always had a lot of common interests. She's always been very private with her phone, before we even got together and even with her siblings and parents or friends. I definitely don't think she's cheating on me though. I definitely don't think she is cheating on me. They don't spend long hours together. It's usually just 15 to 30 minutes every other day or so. He goes with her while she's running errands or taking the baby out. She also can't really lie to me about her location because I can track the location of her phone at all times. She asked me to do it for safety purposes. They don't spend that much time together, they just meet up pretty often. The part about my child spending more time with him on some days does bother me a bit though. She's shown me bits and pieces of her conversations with him on her own and it seems mostly innocent. Discussions about books and memes, etc. Well, the community's being a little bit grimmer than I was, but that's a matter of perspectives. Anyways, let's move on with the update to see what happened after all of this. It's been a while since I made the post, but I figured I'd update you guys on this anyway, in case someone was still interested. I ended up burying my feelings again and decided to carry on with my life as if nothing had happened. Talking about it to a couple of people on here had really helped me pull myself together, at least for the time being. I did end up going to the park with her and the friend for a bit once and sort of watched their dynamic for a bit. Everything seemed normal. She mostly spent time with the baby and he was just sort of there, keeping her company. Things had mostly gone back to normal when she called me at work and asked me to come home early. She'd never done this before and sounded pretty shaky, so I left almost immediately. I got home to find her having a breakdown in the apartment, while one of her old friends from her old job was there with the baby. Apparently, this guy had confessed his feelings to her. He'd said that he had loved her since they first started seeing each other, but had never felt like he was good enough, and now, because he had made something of himself, he finally felt worthy. He also said that he wasn't planning on saying anything originally, but had decided to because he felt that I was very detached, which was because of my anxiety. He had been offered a really good job abroad, which he was willing to turn down for her. She promptly told him to F off, but ended up having a breakdown because she realized that she had essentially lost touch with most of her friends, didn't really enjoy spending time with the women in her mommy group, and had noticed that I was being a bit distant. We had a really long talk that day, and I also showed her the post I'd made as well as some of the chats I had with someone here, which add way more context. She was very understanding and called me silly for not just talking to her. I agree. So we've basically decided that I should cut back a bit on my work hours and she's going to try to reconnect with her friends a bit more. Currently, we're back in our hometown so we can see our families again and they can meet the baby for the first time. My wife's doing much better and she's already reconnected with a couple of her old friends. Well, OP, apparently the ex showing up in your town where you live now, far away from your hometown and in your neighborhood, was a blessing in disguise. She told him to F off, which was great, but also this will have the effect of bringing you guys together and allowing you to have better conversations. So yeah, I'll count that as a win and a blessing in disguise. Anyways, all the best to you and your wife and your child, OP. Take care. And now, let's move on to the next post. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliance and it's by user Deleted. Neighbor tells Gramps he should mind his own damn business. That advice costs neighbor most of his yard and a car. Gramps had just moved into a retirement park with a lot that backed up to county land that was a nature preserve. His backyard was basically non-existent, but he didn't mind as he got to look over the preserve. However, he did marvel at how his next-door neighbor's backyard extended a good 8 feet past his, giving a neighbor a nice space back there. Gramps tried to be friendly with all his neighbors, exchanging phone numbers and the like, and one day he noticed the next-door neighbor was putting down expensive pavers that extended from his back door all the way to the fence posts that designated the preserve boundary. Gramps watched the neighbor yank the 3 rickety fence posts out of the ground and move them back an extra 2 feet into the preserve before pounding them back in. Then started to clear the land, intending to gain himself more area for his pavers. Gramps used to work for the National Park Services as a young lad, so he thought he had better warn his neighbor of the consequences of his actions. So he heads out back for a little chat. The neighbor is immediately defensive, and before Gramps says much, the neighbor tells him, "You're new here, I've been here 10 years, and to mind your own damn business." Gramps decides not to press the issue. Nothing happens that year, but the following year, when most of the park emptied out to head north for the summer, the county comes by to check on the preserve. Gramps notices them going back and forth behind the neighbor's house. The workers are pulling out maps and taking photos and making phone calls, and soon more guys show up. Turns out, the neighbor has moved the posts several times over the years, and in reality, his backyard is supposed to be even smaller than Gramps' backyard. To make it worse, the neighbor put pavers in the back specifically to park both his golf cart and a cherry red sports car back there for the summer. So the county will have to move them before they can do anything else. They tape a notice to the front door and leave. Gramp goes over to read it, and it states that the neighbor was in violation of encroaching onto protected lands. He has 30 days to move his car, tear up the pavers, and pay a fine of $11,000 because of damage to endangered species who inhabit the protected lands, as well as trespassing fees. Failure to do so within 30 days will result in the golf cart and car being towed and impounded. Pavers will be dug up and carted off at the neighbor's expense, and the fine will be increased for every additional day past the deadline. 30 days comes and goes, so a week after that, Gramps has quite the show as first the car and cart were towed, pavers were dug up and hauled off, and the old fence post and ropes were replaced with metal posts and bedded into buried cement bases, connected by steel cables. The whole process took several weeks to finish, but the preserve looked a lot more legit when they were done. A few solar cameras were installed so the county could monitor the wildlife and encroachers remotely. Meanwhile, more notices were taped to the front door of the neighbor's house. By November, the snowbirds were flooding back into the park, including the neighbor. That was Gramps' second show of the summer, as neighbor reads all the notices, digging down until he reads the first one. Then rounds out back and starts screaming and cussing up a storm before running back to his car to dig out his cell phone so he can call the county to find out where his car and golf cart were. Gramps stays indoors to avoid the guy as he is frantically trying to unload his car, turn on his water and electricity, get the AC and the toilets going, and all the while trying to get someone at the county to pick up the phone to give him some answers. He finally gets a live person and proceeds to scream at them while on speakerphone about his car and cart, so the call keeps getting kicked to other people because who wants to help a screamer? Basically, the neighbor is told to come to the county office to get this straightened out. 3 days later, neighbor catches Gramps outside and asks if he was here when the county stole his car and destroyed his backyard. Gramps said he was, and the neighbor says, "Well, why didn't you call me when you saw them putting notices on my door? You had my number up north." Gramps said he had thought about doing that, but figured the neighbor would prefer him to mind his own damn business, so he decided against it. Well, OP, your Gramps definitely took his sweet time on that malicious compliance. Good for him. And hopefully, the neighbor learned the lesson to not steal land from a natural preserve. This post is from the subreddit Petty Revenge, and it's by user Not Another Donut. Take my parking spot that I just dug out? Fine, I'll bury your car. This happened a couple of years ago. It had snowed a bunch, and so I went out to clear a spot for my boyfriend at the time for when he got home from work, police officer. I spent a while digging it out, and as I was finishing up, some girl drove up and parked in it while I was still shoveling it. I told her that I just dug it out intending to use it and asked her to move, and she didn't. She then got out of her car and walked away. Turns out she lived 2 buildings down, so she normally wouldn't park there anyways. Our complex had a mini snowplow, and the dude was plowing in the area and saw this all go down. He helped me move all the snow from the pile he just created and put it all around her car. We buried it up to the door handles on all sides. He then dug out a new spot for me. Saw her later trying to dig out her car. Turns out she didn't have a shovel. So naturally, because I'm petty, I went out and reshoveled the sidewalk from the lot up to our building and threw all of the snow on her vehicle while I did it. Then went inside and took my shovel with me. OP's edit. I only mentioned boyfriend was a cop to justify why he was at work during all the snow, which was why I was digging him out a spot. Also, the spot was between 2 other cars, so she couldn't even walk along the side of her car to get to the door, which also meant that it didn't take much snow to bury her car in. Ah, OP, that was petty and beautiful. She just left her car there like, what are you gonna do about it? Well, you did something about it. Thanks for sharing, OP. And it's that time that we've reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. I certainly did reading them to you. So if you did, then go ahead and give the video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and become a member of our Discord community that just keeps growing, and it is fantastic. And like I said in the beginning of the video, all of the relevant links are in the video description below, so be sure to check them out. And finally, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to watch this video. It really does mean a lot to me that you guys enjoy this content, so thank you once again. And having said all that, I will see you guys in the next video.